Delegation to Malaysia. And now may I please have our honorable guest, YB Hana Yeoh, to come up on the stage, please. Thank you. And as we come to the end of this Youth Summit simulation, I would like to first take a moment to thank everyone involved in this activity, including the Malaysian Youth Association for Diplomacy and Policy, or EADYP, and of course all the youth participants. Your hard work and dedication in the past days have made this event a huge success. We had some great discussions and exchanged important ideas over the past few days on how the EU and ASEAN can work together to address the issue of Myanmar. And now it's time that I would like to invite the youth representative to present the outcome of the simulation exercise. So please join me first in welcoming the President of the European Council to come up on the stage. And next, I would also like to welcome the Chair of ASEAN for 2024. We are looking forward the representative of Lao PDR to come up on the stage. The representative from ASEAN and EU will be reading out a joint leader statement of the ASEAN-EU Summit on political and humanitarian crisis in Myanmar. The floor is yours.
Good evening, Yang Berhormat Minister Hana Yeoh, Dr. Rahul, Mr. Timo, and ladies and gentlemen on the floor. My name is Yeoh, and together with me today is Farid. So we are going to read out the joint leader statement that we agree by consensus today. So we, the member state of ASEAN and the European Union, gathered on 19 February 2023 at the ASEAN-EU Summit to discuss the ongoing political and humanitarian crisis in Myanmar. Noting the decisions of ASEAN-EU Commemorative Summit in 2022 to elevate the ASEAN-EU dialogue relations to a strategic partnership and work together in finding a lasting solutions to the crisis in Myanmar, the members note with concern that since the 1st February 2021 coup in Myanmar, the country has slipped into a deep humanitarian crisis. The military in Myanmar forcibly overthrew the democratically elected civilian government and blatantly violated democratic principles, causing unrest among civilians, political leaders, and ethnic minorities. The member states of EU and ASEAN strongly condemn the continuing escalation of violence, which has placed a large part of the population in highly precarious situations, experiencing poverty, food shortage, displacement, violence, and death. Deploy in the strongest terms the grave human rights violation committed in Myanmar and call for full accountability of the leaders responsible for the coup and other conflicts through the International Court of Justice, with an appointment of a judge based on ASEAN's recommendation to sit on the panel. We demand an immediate and effective end to the latest intensified fighting, which has resulted in a worsening and humanitarian situation throughout Myanmar. We firmly demand that all ASEAN member states, together with all relevant parties, to take concrete actions to effectively and fully implement the 5-point consensus reached at ASEAN's leader meeting on 24th April 2021. This includes strongly urging utmost restraint and immediate cessation of violence, and for all parties to ensure the safe and timely delivery of humanitarian assistance to civilians in Myanmar. The EU and ASEAN will work closely with civil societies, NGOs, and other disenfranchised parties that have been certified by international committees and Myanmar citizens to ensure rapid, safe, unhindered, and comprehensive humanitarian access to all displaced persons and people in need in all parts of the country. We also urge all parties concerned to take concrete actions to enable a process of inclusive and constructive dialogue, in particular with the National Unity Government, the Tatmadaw, the committee representing Phai Rong Su Pantau, and the ethnic groups, as well as granting access by the Special Envoy of the ASEAN Chair to all stakeholders. We urge all stakeholders to work towards national reconciliation in Myanmar with the appointment of Special Envoy to facilitate dialogue between Myanmar and ASEAN. And I'm now going to pass the floor to my colleagues to present the rest of the statement. Thank you.
Thank you. In view of the escalating violence in Myanmar, increased international action is required by external partners of ASEAN in line with the already existing EU arms embargo on Myanmar subjected to the agreement between EU, ASEAN and concerning parties. The member states of the EU will also commit to an extension of the arms embargo to ensure no weapon transfer between states and private parties. Arms embargo extension will include, but not limited to, software, ammunition, materials, and equipment to produce arms. Stand ready to support international actions, including the use of restrictive measures against those responsible for undermining democracy, such as parties that incite violence and serious human rights violations in Myanmar. Since the military coup on 1st February 2021, we, the EU, have imposed targeted sanctions inclusive of companies and military-owned corporations on the Myanmar military, its leaders, and its entities. In the absence of any swift progress in the situation in Myanmar, the EU, with the advice of ASEAN, may consider further restrictive measures such as, but not limited to, immigration policies and diplomatic pressure. Lastly, demand the end of the persecution of all civilians in Myanmar and end to the ongoing violent conflict with the minority parties and ethnic groups and the conduct of free and fair elections in the country. In the spirit of democracy, we urge Myanmar to conduct fair and free elections in adherence to international standards with the ASEAN Special Envoy to monitor the election. The authorities from EU and ASEAN will continue to monitor the situation via the deployment of ASEAN Special Envoy and will be ready to exercise appropriate measures such as a mechanism until peace, law, and a rules-based order is restored in Myanmar. The EU also calls for the immediate and unconditional release of all prisoners arbitrarily detained in relation to the coup, including Aung San Suu Kyi, in coordination with the human rights organization and legal aid representatives. Thank you.
Thank you both the representative of the European Union and ASEAN. And next, I would like to invite Kuchan Dipan Puzani to present the summit statement representing the youth of Malaysia.
Good afternoon, Yang Berhormat and Yeoh. Thank you for, it's our honor to be graced by your presence this afternoon, Dr. Rahul and Mr. Timo. So the stance of the Malaysian youth on the Myanmar crisis. We, the youth of Malaysia, gathered on the 19th of February 2023 at the ASEAN-EU Youth Summit to discuss the ongoing political and humanitarian crisis in Myanmar. Noting the points and statements made by the youth of all representatives in this conference, from our personal point of view as Malaysian youth, we call for the following actions to be taken. Number one, we urge Myanmar to allow freedom of speech and the security of press, especially in reference to journalists and independent media organizations. Number two, countries around the world should put humanity above everything else and should welcome refugees from Myanmar and pledge to provide financial support to Myanmar's neighboring countries and that have hosted them and offer technical and vocational training that will enable them to adapt to new environments as well as to help rebuild Myanmar. Number three, we urge for an end to the violence in Myanmar and for the protection of the human rights of all citizens. Number four, we call on the military junta to release all political prisoners, including elected officials, journalists and activists, and to respect the rule of law and due process. We also urge the junta to lift all restrictions on media, civil society and the internet. And lastly, number five, we call on the international community to join us in our efforts to support the people of Myanmar We urge all countries to provide comprehensive humanitarian assistance to those affected by the crisis and to support efforts to promote democracy, human rights, and the rule of law in Myanmar. We call on the countries in the European Union and the ASEAN to join us in standing in solidarity with the people of Myanmar. We believe that together we can create a more just and peaceful world for all. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Sukan. And today we are very honored to have YB Hana Yeoh with us today. Before I invite YB Hana on the stage, to the floor, allow me to give a short introduction. YB Hana is the Minister of Youth and Sports of Malaysia. She is also the current Member of Parliament for Sengkumbat. Before being elected to Parliament, she previously held 2 terms in the Selangor State Legislative Assembly, representing the Subang Jaya constituency. While serving in the Assembly, she made history by becoming the first women speaker and the youngest person to hold such a position in a legislative body in Malaysia. YB Hana holds a Bachelor of Laws degree and was practicing law in Australia and Malaysia before she transitioned into politics. Without further ado, may I please invite our guest of honor, YB Hana Yeoh, to deliver a special address and to officially close the EU-ASEAN Youth Summit.
Distinguished guests, students, friends, thank you so much for inviting me to come and give you or to share my learning experience. You have all been here for 2 days now, and I understand that you have heard from experts, you have attended various sessions for you to produce this statement. I don't want to comment specifically on the issue or the subject matter, but I do want to come and share some of my learning experiences being a youth elected representative and lawmaker. And I hope that this experience that I share with you will be relevant for each one of you, whether you actually end up becoming a diplomat or not. I hope that you will take home some of these learning experiences. Being a young person is an advantage. Make full use of your youth, because when you are young, you carry with you your generation and new ideas and new perspective. Okay, so that's a very good point, because you have access to what is currently trendy, to what is currently available compared to our ancestors or our parents' generation. Now, I really now cannot imagine a world without Google. Those days, I really have no idea how our parents did research. You literally have to turn up at a library, hunt for a physical copy of a book. You have very limited access to information. Yet, that generation excels so well based on the limitation and the limited resources that they had. Today, we have no excuse. Being a young person, we have no excuse to lack of information. Everything is online, right? And so it is really our duty to go and hunt for those information and to make sure that you have that responsibility to rely on accurate information. When you have oversupply of information, there is now an incumbent duty to ensure that the information you are using is correct and factual. And so to be factual, you really need to engage and listen to the experts. And so this is my second point. Be very wary about acting hastily, in a rush, arrogant and stubborn. Now, I'm sure you have all heard from your parents, you are young and you are stubborn. You know, all of us have heard that. Being stubborn can be a good point because you are firm on your stand. But being firm, you have to ensure that you are standing on something that is factual and correct. Being firm for the sake of being firm amounts to nothing. Okay, so it's important that as a young person, you engage with practitioners, people who are actually doing that work. It's so important because diplomacy requires engagement of all people, and humility is really a key for youth to be successful. If you speak to a lot of young people who are successful, I can tell you, when you speak to their people who work around them, humility is a key factor. Okay, the ability to be teachable when you are young and to learn and engage practitioners. Very important. Do not only listen to one side of the story. Okay. I want to share with you an experience of mine in my first term as an elected representative. I got elected at the age of 29, and it was my first term as the Assemblyman of Subang Jaya. So we were fighting a development issue, I remember, and I got into a discussion, or a heated discussion, with the late Chief Minister of Selangor at the time, Tan Sri Khalid Ibrahim. And of course, Tan Sri Khalid carried with him years of experience in the corporate field. And I was that young elected representative, very fixed in my mind and very fixed on that issue because I thought I was correct. And so I fought that case and I continued fighting that case. But the end result showed that Tan Sri Khalid was right and I was wrong. Okay, so that process taught me that sometimes when people are very experienced teach us, we better stop and listen. That takes me to the next point. The process is just as important as the outcome. In fact, sometimes I would argue that the process is more important than the outcome. Doing the right thing, the right way is very, very important. Especially if you want to be a diplomat, especially if you're engaging in public policy, the process must be correct. It doesn't matter if your outcome is correct. If you don't follow the SOP, you don't follow the process, and you bypass the process, you can end up being in trouble. The other point I want to talk to you about is to be concise. You have to be factual, and you belong to the TikTok generation, right? Length is no longer a consideration. So writing statements, writing books, very, very long presentation, is I wouldn't say it's not relevant, because there are professors and there are people here. But I would say that we have the challenge now to fight social media that is short, like I say, short and trendy. So how do you capture the attention of your readers in 1 minute? That's a constant struggle for me. When I write statements today, I always make sure that I stop at the 4th paragraph. Don't go beyond 4th paragraph, because some of them will only read the headline. So your headline is just as important as your first and last paragraph. And to always make sure that you are short and concise. Because if you lose their attention, they are no longer reading, it defeats the purpose of issuing that statement. Okay? The next point, always have allies, be part of a team. Unity is strength. You can be brilliant as an individual, but if you do not work in a team, you are not an asset to any organization. As an employer, when I take in staff, I will tell you that I look for team players. If you have the skill, but you lack the social skills to actually mingle and to lead a team, that will limit you in your career growth. Don't rush into a solution over sensitive matters. Like your issue today is not an easy subject matter. Okay? And there's a reason why others have not been able to resolve a sensitive issue. So that's why you need to take time to engage and to listen. Some problems are multi-layers in complexities and may need multi-pronged approaches. I give you an example, the roadmap to eradicate child marriage in Malaysia. In 2018, when we contested, we came up with a manifesto. We say we want to raise the minimum age for marriage and we want to abolish child marriage. So immediately when we got into Putrajaya, the expectation was this high for us to ban child marriage. But when we went into our ministry, Dr. Wan Aziza and myself, we were presented with a lot of facts by the experts, and we realized that, oh my goodness, there are actually 4 different kind of marriages, child marriages that we're dealing with, and all of them have different laws and they have different players that you have to engage. One is Muslim marriages. Second one, non-Muslim marriages. Then the third one is orang asli marriages. Then the fourth group, perkawinan adat, customary marriages, Sabah and Sarawak. So you have 4 different types of people, one manifesto to say ban child marriage, and then now you're stuck. Okay, so what do you have to do? We had to conduct multiple workshops, engage different people, because every group has their authority. For Muslim, you have to go before the Council of Rulers, because the rulers are the head of Islam for every state. Then for the non-Muslim, the chief minister, civil law. The third group, orang asli, they have their own law. And then the fourth, customary child marriages. You have Putrajaya cannot dictate to Sabah and Sarawak what they can and cannot do, right? So you have all these problems together. So what do? We had workshop, we brought together all the experts, and we compiled a roadmap. We presented and launched a roadmap, 5 years to eradicate child marriage in Malaysia. And this roadmap can only be successful if we have the cooperation of everybody, and we must engage everybody and take them along the process. Okay, so don't rush into a solution without understanding the complexity of that matter. Nothing replaces hard work for young people. As an employer, you know, you can pick up people who take shortcuts and people who actually work hard. In a team, very easy for employers to pick it up. Okay, so whether you like it or not, yeah, that's how you'll be judged in your career progression. And you just have to work hard. I'm in my 4th term in politics, but I don't sit back and hope to win election when it's campaign time. Today, like I say, people have access to information. People are watching your social media. People know when you go to work, when you go to sleep. Okay, so you really need to make sure that you are consistent in working hard. Every season presents a learning opportunity. You know, if you are going to be a diplomat, you only have a short time in a location. Sometimes your contract may only be 3 to 5 years in a certain country. And so you will never be able to revisit that time. So you really need to make sure that in every career stop that you have, you learn the most out of that opportunity. I want to share with you, when I first became a lawyer, 3 years as a lawyer, I was not happy as a lawyer. I felt like just no life. Saturday and Sunday I'm working, checking documents, and just constantly at work. And then I left law and I went into event management. For 2 years, I went from checking legal documents to checking receipts, because I was doing contest management for Malaysia Mega Sale. And so even in that period, in that season, I was happier as an event manager than a lawyer. But still I thought, oh, you know, there must be more to life than this. And then I became a politician. And now, looking back, I can tell you that 3 years as a lawyer and 2 years as an event manager really helped me to be the lawmaker I am today. Because as a politician, I deal with programs and events, and I also deal with law. So when I look back, every single career change I experienced did not end up in ways, you know. I actually learned something out of it. So every step you take, make sure you grab the most out of it, because as destiny would lead you, the end job that you're going to get would rely on those experiences that you had. Okay? And my final point, really, as a young person, you will never get your youth back. I'm 44 today. I would never return to the years when I was in my 20s. And so I wish there were things that, you know, I could have done when I was in my 20s, but it's too late now. I cannot go back to those years. And so while you can, you must enjoy the process. I wish we had smart handphones when I was in my 20s, so that I could take more photos when I was younger, and I could keep them. But those days, our smartphones were only good for SMS. So today, you have so many things going for you in your 20s. Please make sure you grab and make the most out of it, because you will never have these years back. So I wish you success. Whatever you do, wherever you are, please remember to contribute back to the community and to your nation. I will say this representing the new government, that Malaysia really needs every single one of you. Don't take the shortcut of migrating. We have to give this nation a working chance. We need to work at it. Okay, this nation really belongs to each one of us, and we have to work at it without giving up. Don't give up so easily. Malaysia really is worth fighting for. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Martin Hannah, for sharing your experience and a lot of important takeaways there. Next, and as we have learned from the opening session yesterday, that the EU delegation and Sharoom are each other's strategic partners. And now I would like to invite Mr. Timur Guzman, Chargé d'Affaires of the European Union delegation to Malaysia, to share his observations of the simulation exercise and also his thoughts on how the EU delegation would like to take this partnership and this exercise forward. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, YB and Yeoh, for being here tonight with us on a Sunday night. That really means a lot to us. Thanks a lot to all the co-organizers, all the people who made this possible. I can speak in the name of the few of them who are here, who have been in the brainstorming session when we first came up with the idea to do a simulation game like this. That we never had in mind that we could present the results to a minister of the government, and so this is something we really appreciate. And we appreciate the support, and we appreciate the advice you have given, and I personally can relate quite a lot to it, because I'm also 44 years old. And so, by the way, the definition of youth in the EU delegation is anything below 44, so that's for sure. So I really would like to congratulate you. I know I've done that before. I've done that even when we first met a couple of days ago. You were selected from hundreds of participants. You have invested a lot to make it here. And on Friday night, I have given you the advice to simply make the best out of this weekend and create this as a fantastic opportunity to mingle with fellow youth from each and every state of Malaysia. And what I have seen in the last couple of days and what I've heard from my colleagues is truly inspiring. You can be very proud of yourself. You have managed to make this a lot more interesting. I've personally been involved both in EU Council meetings in Brussels many times, but I've also, what I did not tell you so far, I've also participated in many ASEAN meetings. I've been the German observer to ASEAN for 3 years, working in Indonesia. So also learned a lot of about ASEAN. So I can assure you, meetings of EU and ASEAN are usually not as exciting as your meetings have been from time to time. And but on the other hand, there were a lot of elements that you have managed to bring out of your meetings that have been extremely realistic. And I was really sitting on my chair, and I was really smiling from time to time. Of course, we have with us the High Representative, European External Action Service. Since I, for the time being, work for the EU as well, what you could see that the chair is doing all the work and drafting these things and consolidating all these points. This is very realistic. This is our day-to-day work in the council, but also here locally in Malaysia. And I also had to smile with the comments about the ASEAN Secretariat and how difficult it is to be neutral in many situations, even if you have a strong personal stance and you would like to speak out. And so I also took note of your strong call to reform ASEAN and to even create a new charter. And this is of course a very steep task, but I would say ASEAN Malaysia 2025 is coming. So with this, I would like to once again thank you very much for your fantastic participation. The European Union has used the fact that both in the EU and in ASEAN 2022 has been the year of youth for extensive youth outreach. So this is part of our campaign. We've worked a lot also on political issues, voters' education, met with many youth organizations. We partnered with Malaysia Kini for the youth debathon. UNDI 18 has been an important issue, so youth have become electorally extremely important in Malaysia. And UNDI 18 is a good example what youth can actually achieve. And another example of our times is the issue of climate change. We could have chosen a climate-related issue as well for our meeting today, because climate change is a big issue of our times. I spent a day in Miti this week, and we were talking about how human beings at the moment are a little bit acting like children, putting their like parents putting their children in a bus, knowing that the tires are not working well, and maybe also the brakes of the bus are not working well, because what we're doing to future generation with our Earth amounts a little bit to a situation like that. So climate change, climate action, sustainability is another area that youth are a worldwide driver for change currently. And therefore I join the Minister in encouraging you to be active, to make your voice heard, to work hard, to effect change. And in this, I would also like to add that the European Union will not stop engaging with the youth. This is not a one-off. I would very much like to stay in touch with you. I encourage you to follow our activities. You will be invited to many of our activities because youth in politics, the empowerment in nation building, and in effecting positive change for this world is something that does not stop on a Sunday night with the end of a simulation game. So once again, has been a pleasure for me to spend the last 2 days with you. Please keep us engaged, please keep us motivated, as open-minded, as creative as you are. All the best, and please keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Timo Krishnan. And now may I invite Dr. Rahul Mishra, Director of the Center for ASEAN Regionalism, Universiti Malaya, Showroom, Asia-Europe Institute, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Bam. Speaking after Timo is really a challenge in both figurative and conceptual terms. You set the bar so high and also the mic so high that one has to bring it down to normal level. So thank you, Timo. Let me begin by thanking YB Hanayo, Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports Affairs, an inspiring leader whose speeches, whose work, and whose presence itself brings so much of grace and dynamism to the floor. We are really honored and privileged to have you, Madam, with us today. And I'm sure our participants have also learned a lot from recommendation. I have 2 recommendations, takeaway for myself, short 4 paragraphs. And I'm going to present this to my director and to the Vice Chancellor. That, sir, please stop having those 5,000 word essays for us as our KPI. I wish we could just time travel back and go to the planning stage and have your speech, YB, as recommendation, as set of guidelines for our participants. But this really is a guideline for us for our next events. Ideas that you shared based on your experience and based on how you think youth should behave in a professional setting, in a multilateral, in a team setting. These are things that we learned as a university, as a center, and I'm sure our participants as well. Our strategic partners, as Bam said, Norman, Timia, and the entire team of EU delegation to Malaysia, you really have been a great support to us, and really one of the foundational pillars of this activity and so many future activities. We really are honored and privileged to have you with us in such tight embrace. We also have our allies, Bam, Albert, Tanya and team, who worked tirelessly in making this youth summit a reality. Thank you so much for chipping in wherever we needed your support and your help. And I hope we'll continue working with you in future. Another stakeholder, team members, from whom we learned a lot, are these young leaders of EADYP who have really worked tirelessly in training our participants, in making them understand how to behave, how to participate in a formal summit, how to act like a country, how to present your arguments, how to deal with your day-to-day, as in the problems, logistical issues, hotel and transportation. So really, guys, you've done quite a lot for us to make this summit a reality and a success. My team members from Charum and Asia Europe Institute, Mr. Zardin, who's really up there taking care of all the IT and technical stuff, Mr. Afendi, Puan Afika, Puan Umi, Arif, Gangesh, Puan Halema, Puan Diana, and Puan Nora, and Anshul Zulfi. All of you being here present on Sunday evening really means a lot to me personally, that you took time out and worked with us, with the organizers. Also, Dr. Nurliana Kamuddin, the Deputy Director Academic, who is really one of my closest friends at the Institute. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Fumitaka and Professor Raja in absentia. Thanks to all of you. Finally, my team members at the Charum, and also my dear students, the co-instructors to this simulation exercise, Mr. Peter Branham Wong, a serving Malaysian civil service officer who's had a really vast experience in conducting simulation exercises. Only difference is for youngsters, not for youngsters, but for diplomats and officers. My student Meena from ISIS Malaysia, Marsha, and Nivea for making this event a success. We also had the top leaders, the thought leaders of Malaysia, who've been watching, observing the region, the ASEAN region carefully, Malaysian foreign policy, how Malaysia looks at itself in the wider ASEAN context. Tan Sri Hamid Albar, Professor Jahan Saranamutu, just to name two of them, who participated in our online webinar sessions and tried to share their thoughts with you as to how to make sense of the political humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in Myanmar, and there's really no end to it. I found this simulation exercise very close to my heart, not just because of ASEAN and EU, but Myanmar is a subject that I've been following for the past 20 plus years, 21 years actually. And the irony, the travesty with Myanmar is the more you try to change it, the more it remains the same gloomy picture, which is so bad in terms of humanitarian crisis, in terms of the state of women and children, the minorities, Rohingya and Karen and Kachin, all those minority groups. In such a situation, a country which has for past 70 years been facing these multiple challenges, Malaysia offers a ray of hope. And this is the note that we had on during our opening speech as well, opening session as well. Malaysia could perhaps offer new avenues, new opportunities. Of course, engaging with Rohingya is one thing that we've been doing, but also Malaysia 25 as ASEAN chair could do quite a number of things in bringing ASEAN back on track, in trying to salvage the crisis that we have in Myanmar. And the role of youth in this moving forward is, I really request all our participants to contribute in your own ways, on social media, in print, as newspaper articles, in your debates, in talking to your seniors in your universities. Try and convey what you learned from here, what you learned in these simulation exercise, how Myanmar is important for us as neighbors, how Malaysia is seen as a leader, and how in next 2 years when Malaysia takes over as ASEAN chair, we, the people of ASEAN region, the youth of Malaysia could contribute in making ASEAN a better place and in certainly putting Malaysia forward as a leader of ASEAN. Thank you so much, dear participants. Without your commitment and dedication, this would not have been possible. I thank all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Rahul, for the inspiring words and also the word of thanks. And before we end this session, I would like to once again thank you all the participants for joining this EU-ASEAN Youth Diplomat Program. I hope that you have enjoyed your time here as much as we have enjoyed having you here. Indeed, truly a pleasure to welcome all of you. And like Timo said, we look forward to seeing you in our future events. Before we conclude, may I please invite all the participants to join our VIP for a photo session. Actually, in fact, practically speaking, you stay there, and may I ask the organizer to invite the VIPs to come to the designated area for the photo session. And thank you everyone for your participation in this. Have a great evening. Thank you.
You guys just let the you guys off. And it's called a same like
Saya bagi lampu lah. Ya. Support lampu sikit. Tak kuat lah lampu dia. Air bunyi pun tak kuat sangat. Boleh lah. Boleh lah. Boleh support kan.
Yeah, guys.
Sunday will be you.
Guys, move closer to the center.
Closer to the center, yes, yes.
Yeah, move to the side.